Hey scholars, this is Mrs. Gregerson, and I am so excited to be teaching you symbolic logic today. We're going to use our videos to work on this, but we're going to talk about symbolic logic. You guys actually started really well. You worked with conditional statements, but I kind of held off on a few pieces of information. I think that will be very helpful for you. So first of all, we got to discuss in symbolic logic, what is a proposition? A proposition is a statement that is true or false. So it has to have a valid answer, true or false. So it's a validity is what we say with that. Notation-wise, you use a capital or lowercase letter. And very common ones that we'll use are like P, or Q, lowercase q, R, S, just kind of simple like that. So here's a couple examples here. Like for instance, I would say something like, today is Monday. Now, the validity of this depends on what day it is. Right now it's Wednesday when I'm doing this video. So to me, this would be a false statement. So this would be a proposition. Now the next one, let's sing. That's not a proposition. That's not a false or true statement. I'm just giving you a command. So understand, not a proposition. So we have a little bit more. And now the first example that I gave of this for you was a conditional statement. And the conditional statement, if we remember, is an if-then statement. Now symbolically, we use an arrow going to the right. So we had if P, then Q. And then P and Q were your two propositions that made this. P was your hypothesis, and remember Q was your conclusion. So here's an example of a conditional statement. If you are in geometry advanced, then you will learn symbolic logic. Remember, your hypothesis was you're in geometry advanced. Your conclusion is you will learn symbolic logic. So quick review. And then we had our truth table for the validity of this. Remember our truth table, we had all combinations of true and false propositions put together. And if you remembered carefully that we went through this and we used an example of a boy in class who asked his girl to go to the movies, giving some stipulations. And we found out that the only time that a conditional statement is considered false is if you have a true hypothesis but a false conclusion. And remember, you only have to use, you only have to use one counterexample to prove it false. The rest of the time, they're always true. So you need to memorize that line. The rest of the time, just sit there and go, okay, I know no matter what, even if against my instincts, going false, then false is false, I'm always going to have to say that is true. Now, another symbol that we use a lot in symbolic logic is a conjunction. Now, the conjunction just stands for the word and. It's all it means. It's like a compound sentence is what we're making now. And the symbol for that is like a capital letter, A, but without the bar or cross. Now, let me give you an example of a conjunction. Joe is 2 years old and his birthday is in May. Now, when you think of a conjunction, I need you guys to always put the word and in. But also just remember that word and glues your two propositions together. That means they're inseparable. I have to consider both of them when I make a decision. So just like when I do a truth table for conditional statements, I have to do a conditional statement for conjunctions. So I have true, true, false, false. And then I have true, false, true, false. So I have all possible combinations. And then when I read this, I have true and true. So if I have two true statements, it's true. If I have a true and a false statement, remember they're inseparable. So one false statement outweighs everything. So it's going to be false. If I have false and true, the false statement wins out. It's false. And if I have a false and false, obviously there is no truth in my statement in this case because of the word and. So therefore, it's also false. So let me give you an example of this. Mrs. Gregerson teaches geometry and algebra. Now, when I look at this, here's my propositions. Mrs. Gregerson teaches geometry, and what you'd understand in your head is Mrs. Gregerson also teaches algebra. That is a true and true statement, so it would be true. So kind of an easy way of thinking about it. How do I memorize this one? I always realize if I have a true and true statement, it's always true. Now, the last but not least, we're going to be talking about a disjunction. Now, a disjunction is actually the word or, okay? So it's either or. Now, this gives you choice in your values. And the symbol we use for that is like a capital letter V, opposite of the and. Notice these just are flipped from each other. So with that, an example that I would use is something like, today is Monday, or today is Wednesday. Okay? Now, if that's the case, what is my validity? Now, remember, I'm videoing this on a Wednesday. So if today is Monday, it would be a what? False statement. But, or, I have now a true statement. Now, remember, disjunction, I gave you the hint, it's either or. I don't have to accept the negative. I can always choose the true statement out of the value. It would have a true validity. All right, I'm going to flip the page over. You can always pause me in this video, remember. And I'm going to finish up our notes before I go on to some examples when we work with this, okay? So on this one, I end up getting true, true, false, false for the truth table. True, false, true, false. And so the validity of this is if I have a true or true statement, you pick true. True or false, I always pick the true. Because remember, or, either or, I choose the one that's true. I have false or true, which is true, or false or false. So false or false, that only allows us to use a false statement. So what would I memorize for this one? I would memorize false or false. False or false statements are always false. Let me give you another example of this. Mrs. G wears glasses, or she teaches calculus. Okay, so, or she teaches calculus. So let's figure out what my validity on this was. First of all, does Mrs. G wear glasses? And if you haven't seen me yet, you need to know I do sometimes. So that's actually a true statement. But do I teach calculus? And the absolute answer to that is no, I don't. I teach AP Stats, but not calculus. So that's true or false. So I go up here, what's true or false? It's a true statement. I can ignore she teaches calculus and pick the positive. All right, and then the other day, one last thing before we do examples, is we have to worry about what was a negation. That means make opposite. And we talked about this when we were doing our inverse and contrapositives of conditional statements. So if I make opposite, it means the word not, or you take out the word not. And the symbol you use is the little tilde, like Coca-Cola wave. And so here's how we kind of think about it. If my proposition has a true value, not true would end up being a false value. So it changes the opposite validity of this. If P is false, then not P would end up being what? True. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense with what we've been doing.